On PM Express tonight, AGM-AKER energy deal, is it a rip-off? And there is a whole series of conversations that this has generated over the last few weeks, and it's not stopping. There is a fresh take on this today that's generating fresh controversy on this. That's the energy minister, by the way. Over the last few days, government has been defending the renegotiated AGM-AKER deal, which the minority describe as a complete rip-off. You may be aware that the renegotiated deal, as we now know, was approved by Parliament last Friday by the majority side, with the majority decision that itself was highly controversial. The minority has raised red flags about it, which it says has reduced Ghana's stake from 43% to 18% in the South Deepwater Tunnel Block contract with AGM Petroleum Ghana Limited. Now, the minority has also indicated a potential loss of oil to the country in the negotiated deal, almost the size of an entire Jubilee field, they claim as well. Now, they consider the deal as a total rip-off because the GNPC, they say, has already invested over $30 million in acquiring data and reducing exploration risk over the block. That's making it very attractive prior to the entry of AGM and AKER Energy into the same block. That's the argument. Also, we know some concerns has also come up. There are concerns over the government's rejection of the terms of agreement by the previous Mahama administration, including the forfeiture of free funding of about, say, $62 million, representing 24% of the $259 million as a cost of the well. And this is the thing about this. There's several figures that you have to play with, billions and billions of dollars. The terms negotiated by a previous Mahama-led administration were, and this is a very controversial bit, royalty 10%, GNPC carried interest 10%, GNPC additional interest 15%, and then GNPC local has some percentage as well in this. Now, this has become one of the key things. There have also been questions of why the government seems to be giving so much of the country's resources away when it is in dire need of money for development. Some have even argued that we should be benefiting far more than this. Now, though Parliament approved the deal on Friday, the energy minister has been directed by Parliament yesterday, formally communicated to him to return to the House in 6 months with an update. He needs to renegotiate this and raise government's Ghana's stake in the AGM oil find, well, exploration to 10%. Now, this means he is coming for fresh approval, as the minority had argued, but only to update the House, and the approval was dependent on that happening. Some have asked the question, why didn't we simply wait for these terms to have been settled before we approved it? Now we've approved it. Remember that AGM issued a statement from Oslo yesterday, so they are going ahead. And as far as they're concerned, the terms that Ghana currently has, fantastic deal. There's no room there, if you read that statement, for any renegotiation. But that's what government has asked government to do. So is the AGM-AKER energy deal a rip-off? That's what we'll attempt to answer when we return from the break. My guest in the studio tonight, Benjamin Boakye, Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. Also with us in the studio is Pakwesi Anamwasechi, Executive Director of the Institute for Energy Security. Also join us in the studio. A very intriguing conversation, considering the amounts involved, billions of dollars. By the way, this latest conversation has been triggered by a forum that was organized and addressed by a host of individuals, but led by the former GNPC boss, Alex Mode. Listen to some of the key points that he put out today.
AGM block. The question is, why has Ghana's share in the block been reduced from 49% to 18%? 49% to 18%. 49 to 18. Why has it been reduced? Our government's leadership regarding this matter is further being questioned due to AGM recently asked government to review the stake downwards. This is akin to a road contractor, bidding low in a tender, and then asking for a variation even before he starts the work. You see, people don't know that the block was given to AGM on a tender basis. Other companies, Statoil, another Norwegian company, and two other companies actually bid for the block. The reason why it was given to AGM was that AGM promised us 49% of the block. And the reason why AGM promised us 49% of the block is because GNPC had spent a lot of money on the block before. You all know that we paid AKER about $30 million for the seismic work it has done. To date, no new work has been done. All the money that has been spent on that block has been GNPC's money. So if GNPC has invested, I believe GNPC earns the right on behalf of government for the people of Ghana to negotiate as hard as possible for us to get 49% of the block. And that is what we did. I was part of the negotiation team. In AGM's case, the work program in the initial period, the first 3 years, required them to drill 2 wells, do additional 3D seismic, and spend a minimum of $259 million. So you're supposed to spend $259 million in the first 3 years. If you're successful, you go to the next phase. If you're successful, you go to the next phase. And if you're successful, you hit a discovery, you do your appraisal, you bring a plan of development, and then you develop the field, and then you produce oil. That is how these things work. What AGM is asking is that we change the terms and conditions of petroleum agreement. I have never seen this before. Before they start work, knowing that they went through a tender and they won the tender, and now they have come to ask for a variation. So let's also say that AGM wants to renegotiate. The question is, when can they renegotiate for the terms of the block? There are only 2 times, according to the laws of this country, you can do that. The first time is when you finish appraisal and the field you've discovered, based on the terms and conditions in the petroleum agreement, doesn't make it economical for you to develop it to meet your intended rate of return, which for deep water is about 20%, you can come back to government and negotiate with government, because anybody government brings in is going to ask for the same thing. So you can renegotiate with government. But remember, this is after exploration, after your 7 years exploration, or after you have finished appraisal, if it falls within one of the 7 years. You cannot do that on day 0. And that is what AGM is asking us. So, like I said, the only other time the contractor can come to government to renegotiate this is 5 years to the end of the petroleum agreement. So let's say you've done exploration, you've done appraisal, you've brought a plan of development, you start developing, and then you start producing. So let's say in 10 years you start producing.
So that is a of the GNPC, Alex Mould. Ben, your reaction to that? Your general first comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, very interesting perspectives from somebody who has been around, you know, through the AGM episodes. I mean, we were here as well, and if you could remember at the time when the AGM block was awarded during Mr. Mould's time, we raised significant red flags.
Oh, you did?
Absolutely. I mean, on this particular
So
agreement.
it wasn't the same, because he painted the picture said this was above par, no issue.
And I like the analogy he gives, you know, where a contractor bids low and then he rakes the bid and subsequently come for renegotiation. That's exactly what happened in the AGM situation. We said that the agreement was too good to be true. Okay, and primarily because at the time Hess campaign was so successful and Hess was just adjacent to that block, and GNPC had done data gathering on that block, so it looked promising. And AGM appeared all out of the blue, and they were promising huge numbers, you know, fiscal take for Ghana. And our concern really was whether AGM really had the capacity and the background to be able to raise the financing that was required to be able to explore the block. And we checked the background of even the people who were behind AGM on the contract. And even at the time realized that one of the directors, defined himself as a Ghanaian when we checked and realized that he was an Israeli. So that is the history to this agreement. And this was a company that was registered in Gibraltar. We tracked the beneficial ownership to several companies. In Gibraltar, it was owned by Minesco OGG, AGR of Norway. And then when you break down Minesco, it was owned by Minesco WA, and then Metsongai. And, so it was an octopus arrangement hidden in a foreign country. And those were the concerns we raised about AGM and their capacity to actually exploit the block. So we are not surprised that AGM, after 6 years of owning the block, could not drill a single well, and therefore had to sell the block to AKER. And there's another history to it. AKER owned the block in 2008. And then when government changed hands, then the new government said that they illegally acquired the block because the company they used to get a block was not locally registered. Okay, so you take a block from a company that is not locally registered, and you give it to a company that has imposters, who are pretending to be Ghanaians when they were not, to pick up the block. So that was the kind of scenario we had. And AKER was paid $30 million in anticipation that we would take the block, give it a company that will give us better terms, so that in the short to medium term, we can start producing or operating the field for possible discoveries actually to be made on that block. So that was the kind of decision we made. Took a block, paid $30 million to the contractor, and then awarded to AGM, who did not show enough capacity to actually exploit the block.
No, his point is that the current agreement we have with AGM is a rip-off, and that we've somehow reduced our stake from 49 to 18%. And when AGM was given that deal, because they were the only company, they were the only firm that had assured us that we'll get a 49%. And for that, he says, was the basis. And now they got the deal, and now somehow we've reduced it to 18.
That is a fair position to have. And I mean, when it comes to discussions and arguments of this nature, people will have positions. I mean, there are people who even say that let's Ghana hold the oil 100%, which you have owned forever, and nobody exploited it. You understand? So as for percentages and take, you can argue for how much you want. But the question is, which contractor can take that and be able to go to the market and raise financing for exploration? Okay? So if a contractor promises you 50%, or it's 49 plus 50% on the approximately, and is not able to drill, it's not able to raise financing to be able to exploit, your 59% doesn't result in any gain.
True.
And that's the scenario we have in our hands. So it's a question of whether to hold dear and salivate on possible returns, which may never come because you are giving so much incentive. Somebody has promised you so much, and you're not simply delivering. So it was an option of saying, okay, let's Ghana wait. Now we have a contracting regime that allows competition. Let us wait for the contract to lapse, and then we can put it to tender. Okay, and get a block. Or saying that we want exploration now. We want a company that can actually go to the field and drill tomorrow and look at what potentially is on underground. So those are discussions that will bring varied opinions. And ultimately, the country will have to take a decision. And in a democratic society, it cannot be left on the street. People have to vote on it. And that is what Parliament did. My worry really is that in such instances, you have, Parliament being rushed into taking some of those decisions. Exactly. Which, to me, is really not necessary.
In fact, we'll come to what Parliament did on Friday, because there have been serious ramifications and post that Parliament has written to the Energy Minister to do a few things. We'll come to that. But just on still initial comments, I'll come to you, Pakwesi, shortly on the same question. The minority, okay, well, not minority, the former GNPC boss and those who think like him at the forum today said the AGM-AKER deal is a rip-off. In fact, ASAP was directly mentioned as being one of those people who misrepresented and doesn't understand the issues. Do you? What's your position on this rip-off argument? Is it or is it not? Ben.
Oh.
Is this? Because I'll come back with you shortly. I want to take your direct response to that. Is it or is it not a rip-off?
You see, when we talking about interest, it's easier to lump it up for whatever gain you want to get and say, oh, Ghana has lost, we have moved from 49% to 18%. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't?
No, not at all. I mean, we have what we call free carried interest. What that means is that Ghana is not going to pay for the cost of exploration, the cost of development, if there is a discovery. All we pay for is recurrent expenditure when production starts. Okay, so that absorbs you of any risk in this business. But commercial interest means that you are paying for exploration, you are paying for development, and you are paying for recurrent expenditure when there is a discovery. So the 24% and the 15% that was owned by GNPC and Exploco respectively means that we have to at some point cough money to invest into the blocks. Okay. So that is a decision for a country to take. Whether if you have money, say $10, $20 million, whether you want to risk that into a petroleum business or you want to finance your education, you want to finance your health, and allow deep pockets to be able to do that. There are businesses and investment out there that can say that, oh, we are this year throwing $1 billion into Africa to see what we can find in the waters of Africa. That is not the kind of pockets that we have.
Just going on a fishing expedition.
Exactly.
Hoping to catch fish. You might
if they throw 100 million in Ghana and they make a loss, they could win in Nigeria, you know, with a similar amount, and that can compensate for it. So there are deep pockets that are actually driving exploration activities. So let us not just salivate and think that there is potential oil and therefore let Ghana also sacrifice to go and put money in there. When the filth even on our streets, we are not able to clean it up. Okay? When people are still schooling under trees, where the agriculture sector is in shambles. So that is a decision that a country.
So you're saying that the reduction in our stake is justified, because
I mean our position has been
more stake means more investment that we have to cover.
More risk.
More risk.
Yeah, exactly. That you have to.
A lesser stake means the private firm is carrying almost everything.
Exactly. They are carrying you.
And when there's exploration, you get the money anyway.
You take your royalty,
but
you take your taxes, and you take your free carried interest.
Okay. Pakusi, where do you stand on this? Is there a rip-off?
Well, our problem with that, there's definitely will be shortchanged, and
there's definitely shortchanged.
So, we think that we could have had a better deal than what we have today. In 2014, when this deal was ratified, it was clear that Exploco was going to hold a commercial interest. Did anybody have problem with
when
this?
you say Exploco, I want my viewers to appreciate that Exploco is in fact a GNPC subsidiary.
Exactly, GNPC subsidiary.
Okay, so let's just say this is the government of Ghana rep in the business.
Exactly.
So that people understand.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's a government of Ghana rep in the deal.
Supposed to be doing the exploration production for GNPC or GNPC unit of production and exploration.
So this is our horse in the race.
Exactly.
Our horse in this race is Exploco.
Good.
Go on.
From 2014, we knew they were holding a commercial interest.
Okay.
Did anybody have problem with that? We knew very well that if you have commercial interests, you are going to cough money. You are going to contribute to the exploration and production. We never had anybody raise an argument to say that, no, let's not start now. Of course, there should be some capital outlay to solve all this issue. We are here, and we saw 2018, 2019 expenditure budget for GNPC sent to Parliament for approval, asking for more than $40 million to go and embark on CSR, corporate social responsibility. Needless. We're here when GNPC took money and sent it to BOST to support them, when they should have focused on their own strategic goals and their mandates. You know very well that within the Petroleum Holding Fund, there's money reserved and allocated to GNPC to be able to get to their operatorship position one day and do all this. So there is money around of which GNPC is not being managed because it's not being managed professionally and because there is some political influence there. All this over the years, the money that goes to GNPC, politicians find a way to take some to go and meet political agenda. They ask GNPC to go and take up some commitment and endeavors. That is not really their
So I guess the point you're making is that when government says, well, we don't have money, and so let's reduce our stake, your argument is
there is money that we are spending somewhere that
we
is
are
needless.
Spending on needless ventures.
Exactly.
That should have been put in this.
That could have been put into this. Are you getting me? So nobody can say that we shouldn't start from somewhere. We've all been dreaming one day where GNPC will have position to earn us more. Look at the past 5-6 years. You know the oil's contribution to our national budget and revenue is less than 7%. Because it's basically hinged on your royalties and your taxes. And you get these taxes when the companies make profits. What about the season when they make losses? But to have your own equity of, say, 30%, 49%, or even the 18%, it tells you that this is the oil production, your bits of the oil production, aside the royalties and the taxes. So you get something out of this. And so the next thing is that we all know that in the carried interests and whatever, for your initial interest and additional, or the initial interest, it is carried. It's done by the contractor, best all that cost and later you pay. This is not unique to the AGM agreement. In all the other agreements, it's the same. So let's not put the picture as if that AGM is the only company that's going to carry
the country. You're saying government has no justification to reduce our stake from 49 to 18?
Even the process that we used to get to this point, look at the way the whole deal or ratification was rushed.
So let's talk about that. I know that is a controversial one.
Look at
Ben has touched on it, that it was rushed.
It was rushed.
You also said it was rushed.
Today I listened to Mr. Okujato Ablakwa, and he said that it's not every parliamentarian that even had a copy of this amendment. And so people went voting and agreeing to things they have not even read. Because one, time was not on their side. Two, they were not resourced well. They didn't have the opportunity to go back to their constituents, to meet other think tanks, to meet other people, to ask. So they could have perused it and also come from an informed position. Look at the local partner, Quad Energy. When was it formed? Just about a month ago or 3 weeks ago. Was it meant for this purpose? Or we could have taken our time. And if you look at the whole amendment, they show clearly the capacity of AGM, their background. Nothing was said about Quad Energy. And today we are hearing allegedly that a key member of Quad sits on the board of AKER. And so you could see that Quad Energy becomes an extension of AKER. It defeats even the local content and participation clause or the thought of that.
Yeah, I mean,
so I think it was rushed, and we could have had a better deal if we'd taken our time to go through all this.
But Ben, do you agree with that? Because many people say, listen, this is a multi-million, possibly $1 billion thing. A place where we've already invested so much money to do seismic investigations, the data was available, etc., etc. And so the risk there was so minimal, and yet we rushed it. We are now asking the energy minister to go back and renegotiate. In fact, the letter that Parliament writes to the energy minister, which really is strange for me, because I must admit, I'm sure maybe you, the expert minds, have seen this before, but this is the first time I'm seeing Parliament approve something and write to the minister subsequent to say, do something to make the agreement effective. It says, the House adopted the above resolution subject to the following approved recommendations of the Joint Committee on Mines and Energy Finance. And 3, the first one is that the Ministry of Energy must renegotiate the additional interest from 3 to 10%. That the Ministry of Energy, together with Petrica, should facilitate the resolution of issues surrounding the 2.5 shareholding interest of Met Songhai in the AGM Gibraltar and its consequential interest. Does this make sense to you?
I'll come to that, but I mean, let me address some of the concerns my friend is raising. I mean, it is interesting that today we're hearing about rushed agreements. This has been a history of the oil and gas industry.
It has been.
Yes, so all the big deals get rushed into Parliament, and we have spent time criticizing this kind of approach to because sometimes a poorer country, somebody is promising you sweet deals and you are not careful, you tend to rush this kind of arrangement, which we have criticized consistently, that it is not necessary to actually do that. We've had criticism about companies that are registered few months to
so Quad is not the first one?
Never been, and it will never be in this industry. I mean, we have seen Camac and all the companies that came in, between 2013. Some were registered months before they actually, operators, not even local content partners. Operators who came in, a few months they got the blocks, So it's not a new story. And I think there's a conversation to be had. The country can rather say that this is the rule, okay? If you are registered less than a month, it makes sense to say that because of that you cannot apply for blocks. There has to be a rule to that. It shouldn't be just based on pick and choose and speculation. Today it doesn't favor you and therefore it is rushed. Today it doesn't favor you because the company was just registered a month ago when you were doing the same. And I think that is where the conversation has to be deepened so that we have a national position on some of these matters and take it away from the politicians, toying with our sentiments and calling us to come and sit here and discuss, the issues the way they want it to be. So I was saying it's been a history, to this, and that's what it has been over the period. And again, it is not right for Parliament to be rushed. People have to synthesize and understand what is being signed on their behalf, and if they have any input, they can make that input to them. My position, clearly, is that Ghana should not be risking money into exploration, particularly into the deep sea. I mean, in countries, even in Nigeria, now, Nigeria says that if you go 1,000 meters into the sea, no royalty, because they want to attract investment into their deeper waters. Gabon is saying that they are cutting their taxes, to attract investment. So it's not just our own terrain. We should look at what is happening around and see how we position ourselves as a country. But that discussion shouldn't be hijacked by a few. It should be a deeper discussion on how do we want to approach our oil and gas industry whilst we solve our problems. We have problems to attend to so that we are not risking our money to go and pick. And I've heard conversations that, it is carried interest and we will only pay when there is a discovery. There are still choices to be made when there is a discovery. If you are going to develop a field of $4 billion and you have 10% additional interest to pay for the development, that is $400 million. So it is a decision whether to put your $400 million into oil project or invest that into education. So,
but he raises a very important rebuttal to that, which is that, and in fact, I learned this from you because you raised this, that the GNPC budget that we saw recently had a huge chunk of funds in there for corporate social responsibility. How much was this? This was almost 50 million, if I'm not mistaken, right? And we needed what, $47 million, right, to maintain our interest. I think in 10%, if I'm not mistaken, you correct me. And from what Alex Moat says today, this was budgeted for. It was in the budget, but this government comes and takes it out and says we don't have money, and so let's reduce it to 18%. That's the point he's making. So we have money to do other things and not money for exploration.
That is the part of the waste, with GNPC, even from when Mr. Mould
So the money is there. Use it for that.
Let's have that discussion. What do we want to do with our money?
Definitely exploration.
That is not a position
corporate social responsibility.
Corporate social responsibility is not what I share, because you cannot.
So you don't want a corporate social responsibility, but you also don't want exploration.
If the state has money for development, let us focus on developing and allow deep pockets to take the risk. Okay, and I mean, the point about there was money, you had money 2014 to 2016. You didn't apply the money to buy the shares. At the same time, people were buying 40% of the same business.
No,
if it was a priority,
if
it was his priority, he would have bought it.
Alesmo explains that the reason why they didn't do that was that the ITLOS
it's not a justified reason, because at the same time when the ITLOS was in place, other people bought. Look, oil bought 40% of that stake and sold 2% to fuel trade. So people were investing. You were not investing in POD, which I heard him also say. You were investing in the discovery that had been made. Whether the POD was ready or not, you were supposed to buy a 10% share, which you say you had the money. So why did you not pay for it and lost the opportunity to actually apply to that? But let me also touch on the point you raised
about the parliament. About the parliament.
I mean, that is the people's representative, and they are saying that go and negotiate for additional 10% interest, which will be paid for if there is a discovery. So if the contractor decides to go to site, then it means that he has imbibed, the contractor has imbibed what Parliament requires of them to do. So without that would vitiate the contract.
Did you see the AGM statement from Oslo yesterday?
I saw it, yes.
It was categorical that the deal we have with them, that the government, our stake in this, is perfect. They think that it is the best anywhere in the world. You read it?
I read it.
So they are not open, clearly, to this renegotiation that Parliament is asking
they didn't
for.
discuss the fiscal terms. They only balked it and said it's in excess of 55%. So that could be inclusive of the additional interest. So basically that is it. So if they go ahead, it means that they agree to what Parliament is saying, because Parliament can withdraw the agreement based on the decision they have made. And that's the decision of the people.
What's your take on this? Because
I wish...
Is this standard practice, though? That you approve the thing, and then you ask the minister to go and renegotiate?
Yeah, there are conditional clauses in most of the time. You can give a condition.
Well, in the industry, there are a lot of conditions precedent and all that, so it might not be just akin to this alone. But let me come back to this point. The fact that somebody rushed a deal some years ago doesn't warrant that going forward we should be sitting there and watching the same thing done again. Nigeria is moving to offshore. Nigeria has been plugging low-hanging fruit for many years, drilling and producing the oil mainly onshore. They want to encourage people to go offshore. And so if they are reducing their fiscal terms, it's for them to decide. After all, AGM has agreed in principle since 2014 that this is what we can do. If they want to come back to you again, and even want to look at it again, we say it was rushed. And because it was rushed many years ago with other projects, should we sit here as civil society and say that it's been done for Kojo and Kwame in the past, so Ekuya should enjoy the same? It becomes a concern for...
I think it was just making a factual
point.
That it's happened in the past.
Yes, of course, but this time around...
But it doesn't follow to say that because
even in the past that it happened, I'm sure Ben spoke about it.
Yes.
It is still time for us to speak about it. We'll never give up talking about it.
And he agrees that this latest one too was rushed.
Absolutely.
Good. And that is something we should encourage going forward. We shouldn't encourage. People should make an informed decision. To get parliamentarians say that we didn't get copies, yet it's been passed, been ratified, with a caveat though, that's where we should begin to look at. And again, like the question you asked about AGM, now their statement is bold there, that we're getting the best deal. I wish we could have seen the fiscal terms to assure us that they've captured what Parliament has even given them. I'll ask the minister to go and negotiate with them. There's no clarity here.
There isn't clarity?
In the statement, I don't see
it. Is there?
No, I think if Parliament put up a conditional clause, for the approval, that has to be satisfied. Of course, I mean, there's no other way to it. If you don't satisfy that condition, then the block is not yours. It can be cancelled any day. You could lose your investment.
So Parliament can go back and undo what they've done.
Absolutely, based on that clause.
Yeah, but the question is, and maybe this may be a layman's question, but it still has to be asked. If that's true, why didn't Parliament do that out from the onset?
No, I think that's what they have done.
Because they believe that a renegotiated deal is better. So the question that layman people will ask is, why don't we wait for that renegotiated deal to happen first before we approve it?
Well, I think that conversation will have to be had with Parliament and the ministry. The excuse I've heard is that in between the time that Parliament is even away, AGM or AKER is willing to drill.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
They are willing to start drilling immediately. So those are the excuses, but still not concrete enough to say that that was the reason why it was rushed. But that is the judgment of Parliament, and we can always question it.
Yeah. So there's a bigger question really also about the multi-billion dollar that this AKER and AGM thing, and there's a suggestion today from the former CEO that there's state capture as well in the sector. And I want to read parts. It's alleged that there's some agreement between GOG and either directly or indirectly through the Petroleum Commission and AKER, where AKER, in its $4 billion development of the Pecan discovery, will be allowed to use its preferred vendors in its contracting strategy rather than go through the tender process as prescribed by law. If this is so, then AKER being essentially an oil services company and not known as oil E&P company could basically capture most of the lucrative initial contracts in the development of the Pecan field, which is estimated to be somewhere close to $4 billion and completed within 3 years. So that, he says, also means that these preferred companies could be encouraged to now form local partnerships with companies that have no expertise in the industry, as there's no transparent local content procedure and no tender processes.
These are speculations. I can't speak to this. I mean, I have no business speculating. He is putting out, information that he cannot confirm. Hearsay. If he has facts, he brings it out, and then all of us can engage around it, because we have a law that actually ensures that there is competition for contracts and ensure that the benefit of the interest and the local businesses are served. And if you cannot be concrete about them, you don't speculate, really.
What do you know about this?
Well, I also heard the same, but the good news is that it's not been approved. The minister asked, no, that was for AKER. He asked AKER to go and look at it again. And so, to the extent that it's not been approved, I can't say that we've had a problem there. If they ask to have sole sourcing in their taking of vendors, and it's been rejected by the minister, it's good. Because if it's agreed on, what it means that if you do sole sourcing, they can part the cost. But we don't have any basis to accept that that's the norm now and it's been accepted. Okay. I understand that the minister has rejected the POD or declined it for some purposes. Yeah. Let's see what they come back with.
So with where we stand with AGM, they can go ahead and do what they've already planned to do.
I mean, the contract has been approved, subject to that condition. So if they agree to give back extra 10%, which we will have to pay for, as I have explained already, I mean, they can go ahead. If not, they can decline.
I see.
The contract.
But so my question, and I'm sure most ordinary listeners will ask, why is there so much noise about AKER and AGM? Do you understand, from Imani, it became a big deal, and I know you've studied that, and we all know how this became such a big deal with the current government responding. And then AGM, which by the way is linked to AKER, right, has also come out for some questioning. Is all the noise justified around AKER, AGM, and the suggestions about?
I keep saying that in all of this conversation, you cannot have right or wrong position in some instances. I mean, for example, fiscal take. How much do you want, from a contractor who wants to exploit in your waters? You can decide to even own 100% and keep the blocks. When you have money, you go and drill. Somebody can say that I want people to go and drill today or tomorrow, and therefore I'm willing to give incentives. And that is the posturing of government today. So they are saying that they want investment. And the opposition says, no, you cannot give too much investment. So give more to the country, whether it means the block lying idle, which has been happening over the years. So it is for citizens and their representatives to decide that these are the positions that are on our table. There are some who believe that we can leave the blocks lying idle. We can get more incentive whether investment comes or not. And there is a position that says that let's grant incentives and get companies, E&P operators taking up the... So it cannot be a right or wrong position, except that a majority must win on this.
I see.
So it's a question of democratic governance in this process. How does the balance tilt? And that has to be just a democratic process.
Society groups will argue and will make our case, not just looking at the terms, but even the process. We will call for value for money. We'll call for due diligence and all that. While we do this, it's normal. Politicians feed on it and score points. And so it's something that we've seen many times. And for politicians, you can't dictate for them what they will do. But for us, we'll still make our case clear and say that we could have done things better to be able to hold on to our equity, because we have money that we spend on other endeavors that are unnecessary, doesn't really fall within the core mandate of GNPC and Explocor. And so we could have held on to some of the equity or more of that, because what we're talking about is not just the royalties and taxes. Taxes, we get it when they make profits. It's cost-based, it's profit-based. But for the equity we talk about, if they drill 100,000 barrels today, if you take our own gross, if you take the royalty out, what is left? You apply the cost oil, take part of your exploration and development cost, and what is left based on the percentage computation, we take our part before we come to the issue of taxes and the rest. We think we could have had more because we have an opportunity that we use to do things that are unnecessary. We make this thing. We also say that it was rushed. We could have taken our time to look at it well. People could have gone to consult their constituents and come and make an informed decision and all that. And so we'll not speak talking about these things. And if it's good as well, there are many times that we say, oh, good, I'm married too. Renegotiation. I'm married, thumbs up. Except did the same thing. If it's bad, we will sit aloof and watch this. It's normal.
There's a big conversation also happening, and something that we haven't explored quite a bit on, about the lack of, and Alice Moore addresses, says, what he calls a misconception being paraded around is that the reason why there has been no drilling activity since new PAs were signed in 2014, 2015 is because the blocks were awarded to incompetent operators. He says, however, the stall in drilling when most of these 13 blocks were given out is a result of the 8 loss injunction. And I know HF has been a pain to make the point that we keep on giving blocks to companies that lack the requisite capacity, requisite know-how to drill. They sit on the blocks just to resell it to somebody else. And we are not discovering our oil, which then threatens our ability to sort of keep producing, which our economy needs, obviously. But the former GNPC also was in charge then, who gave all these PAs away. We heard who say that these blocks, they are going to, terminate some of them and give out. He says that's not actually the case. I know that's been a key issue for you in the past.
No, I mean, we have been doing, we've been doing this contract monitoring for so long, and that cannot be the true statement. The 8 loss injunction affected, I think, about 4 or 5 of the, I don't have the data here right now, but majority of the contract areas that were awarded in that space of time were not within the 8 loss injuncted area. So the fact that all of them, who did not fall within the 8 loss area, could not also go to site to work, shows that these were speculators. They were not serious EMP operators. But
that hasn't stopped. We're still giving contracts to people that you have concerns with about their background.
No, I mean, that cannot be justified. I mean, when you give a contract, I mean, in recent times we haven't seen any. I mean, even before Mr. Mulder's, they gave 1 block to ENI, and already they have gathered data, they are preparing to go to drill. These are serious companies, you understand? But those small boys they give,
there's some sitting on it for years now.
They are not working. They are not doing any work on the blocks. So it cannot be just because of the 8 loss. We can grant those who were affected by the 8 loss injunction, but the majority of the blocks that did not fall within the 8 loss injuncted area, why did you avoid to speak to those ones?
I know you've raised issues with AGM in the past. Today, looking at the statement issued yesterday, your confidence in them is so good?
You see, the AGM of the past is not the same AGM. That's what we have to realize. They sold out, probably made their money, which we told you, that they were speculators waiting to make money and go, and that's what they've done. So they just sold out to AKER. And AKER probably decided to keep the name AGM. If somebody buys your studio, he may decide to keep the name and not change it.
You keep JoyNews, but the operators
have changed. And that's the scenario we have now. So the AGM of the past is not the same AGM we have.
So you're happy with their know-how and the ability to actually do the drilling and exploration?
I think in this business, you cannot be happy until the operator or the contractor decide or is held to the responsibility of actually going to site to go and drill. That is what
they say they are going. They say
they are going. So we are going to monitor that.
Okay.
Let's see that they are able to spend money and drill. Because drilling is not a joke. Yeah. You are talking about going to sink $50 million into a well without knowing what will come out. So that is the kind of exercise we want companies to want to undertake and spend money to do. So we have to monitor. We have to ensure that the contract is signed. They said they wanted to go to site and drill in between the next 1 month. Let's see what happens to the block. Whether they will actually go to drill as they the excuse they use.
Because you don't have
to
any
hold on
issues
to the block.
with AGM and its ability to do what
No,
it says.
it's not the ability of AGM alone, but the prospect of the field. If AGM is serious, I'm not sure they will hesitate at all. I won't be surprised by
because the data already shows that is
okay. Just that they need to go and affirm it. They need to, after exploration, if they find any oil, they need to now appraise it and be sure how much it's being held. There's been speculated 1 billion barrels thereabout. Some data need to come clear and show how much. I won't be surprised by the next few days. You hear AGM announce that they've sourced for a rig to start exploration.
Your confidence is that high.
Why are you opposing it?
Because
if you know somebody who come and spend $15 million to drill and you want to oppose it.
No,
that is what Ghana want to see.
You see, we want to see AGM go to the field. I say I won't be surprised that within the next few days they will announce that they found a rig or they procured a rig or secured one to start because they know what exists there. In fact, they are in a hurry.
So that's why you're saying that we should have kept our stake higher.
You see, we negotiated from a very weak position.
And somebody knows what exists.
You see,
Ghana wouldn't contract anybody if we knew what.
But that's a view out there that GNPC has already done a lot of work that shows that.
But even making the argument,
you don't use data to prove that oil is commercially in existence in any field.
Did they say you don't use data?
You don't use data to decide that. You use data to give you clues on where to drill.
Good.
Even when the data, you see, this is what happened. I think maybe.
And even with the exploration, when you discover, you are going to appraisal. Your discovery information is also a data.
Yes, but
and you use it to go and do appraisal. So we still use
GNPC
data.
has not drilled on that block before, so they don't have drilling information.
So what data are they holding on to?
So what they have is seismic survey.
It's still data. You see, if it's not valuable, they wouldn't have gone to purchase it.
That is not the point I'm making.
It's valuable, carries value,
but it doesn't tell you that there's oil there. It gives you a clue of what kind of geological structure you have on the ground. And geologists understand that oil is trapped in certain structures, in certain form of rocks, underneath. But the fact that you know that sandstones will likely contain oil doesn't mean that the sandstone you have seen on your map contains oil. Else nobody will struggle to actually discover.
So your final point, because we need to.
So what you have to prove that oil there is to actually drill on the ground to see whether there's oil there or not. And that is what the contractors have not done.
Okay. And you have confidence that AKER, AGM, PECAN, all of them have what it takes to do the job?
I hope so. I mean, they are promising, I hope so. But we want to see serious, aggressive companies who can actually have the financial.
I'm convinced that they will start as soon as possible because of the data they are holding. GNPC.
There's a lot of value you're placing on that data.
You see, GNPC have held this data for 6 years. You see, they've held this. They understand the structures of these fields. They understand, and so they have a certain clue of which AGM has bought into and AKER has bought into. They will go to the field as soon as possible. Mark it on the wall within the next 1 week.
Well, whatever, it's good news for us if they do and if what we find. Benjamin Boachi, Executive Director of ASAP, Pakwesi Anamwasichi, Executive Director of the Institute for Energy Security. My name is Evan Spence. Enjoy the rest of your evening.